Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Coming up, tonight Germany is facing an uncertain political future as the far right looks to make major gains in the country's eastern regional elections. We'll have all the latest on this topic in just a moment, but first, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. Poland has officially commemorated the 85th anniversary of the start of World War II. 20 years ago, Chechen terrorists took a school in Russia hostage in one of the worst terrorist crises in the country's post-Soviet history. And Polish football superstar Robert Lewandowski receives the Order of the Smile for his work on improving children's lives. Today marks 85 years since the outbreak of World War II. On September the 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, giving rise to a conflict that claimed more than 70 million lives. Our reporter Kazimierz Świeciak was at the commemorations and has this report.
85 years ago, the Second World War broke out, and it all began right here at the Westerplatte Peninsula. This place became symbolic of the Polish heroism, as the Polish troops were only supposed to last several hours here at the peninsula, but instead they lasted an entire week, defending this peninsula against a German warship. Polish officials gathered here emphasized the heroism of the Polish troops and how they defended this place. But of course, it's impossible to talk about the Second World War today without mentioning the war that is happening just beyond Poland's borders right now, the war in Ukraine. Polish officials, including Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk and the Minister of National Defense Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz, mentioned the fact that they want to modernize the Polish army to make it one of the biggest in Europe in order to be prepared for any eventuality.
We will not be safe unless we fulfill the two great needs of any nation that wants to be victorious. The first need is patriotism, a willingness to sacrifice for the homeland and to be heroic when necessary. The second factor is also a modern, strong, well-organized army. We are saying this today in such a straightforward language because, unfortunately, our hopes, which for decades here at Westerplatte were uttered aloud every 1st September, those words, "no more war," have not come true. This war is close to us.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Prime Minister, for those words, because they speak plainly about how we should proceed. We need to be united, to have a strong and viable alliances, a well-functioning modernized army, commanded with soldiers with the best equipment, with the latest aircraft, such as the F-35, which we have received this week for the armed forces of Poland.
For all Poles, the tragedy of the Second World War is something that cannot be forgotten, especially in the face of the ongoing wars elsewhere in the world, especially, of course, beyond Poland's borders in Ukraine right now. From Westerplatte, Kazimierz Świeciak, TVP World.
The Alternative for Germany party has won a state election for the first time, exit poll results suggest. Meanwhile, the coalition governing Germany at the federal level has secured a relatively small share of the votes, with the AfD's rise in popularity sparking concern amongst many Germans.
The Alternative for Germany party won Sunday's state election in Thuringia, as suggested by the exit polls. The party is expected to receive 33.5% of the vote. The centre-right CDU came in second, with 24.5% of the vote. Third place was secured by a new party, the BSW, which holds an economically left-wing, anti-immigration platform. The three parties which formed the coalition government on federal level, the SPD, the Greens and the FDP, receive only 11.5% combined. This is the first time that AfD has won an election. The party's anti-immigration, Eurosceptic and isolationist stance has led to significant criticism from other political forces and has been a cause for concern among large sections of the German public. The party is frequently denounced as extreme.
That's typical. Since the AfD has been in parliament, there has been nothing but hate here.
AfD voters reject the extremist label.
No one wants to be called right-wing extremists or Nazis. We make conservative politics, but that's far away from right-wing extremism. That's what people are told every day, and they fall for it.
The AfD will most likely not enter any coalition governing Thuringia, as all other major parties pledged not to cooperate with it. Elections were also held in Saxony today, where CDU is expected to win 31.5% of the votes, followed by AfD with 30%. The BSW received 12%, while the Federal Coalition 14%. The AfD is also projected to win the state elections in Brandenburg later this month. Its support is significantly higher in former East Germany compared to the West.
At least 40 people have been injured in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv following a Russian missile attack. The Ukrainian forces are also believed to have struck a refinery near Moscow in a drone offensive, as Russia claims to have shot down 150 Ukrainian drones. And
the missiles struck a mall, an events hall and a street in the center of Kharkiv, thus forming a 3-meter radius crater at the site of the blast. Some people fled to shelters to save their lives.
I was at work when there was an explosion. Glass shattered, our furniture fell. I just ran to the metro as I was. It was very loud, there was a fire, but I didn't know what exactly had caught fire. As we came here, there was an even louder explosion. People were shouting. There were injured people, there was blood. I don't know what else happened, I just sat in the metro.
In the attack, the Russians fired a missile that is 1/3 more powerful than the bomb they had used the day before to destroy the entrance of a 12-story residential building in Kharkiv, killing 7 people. This time, only the damage to the residential area was substantial.
There was yet another attack on Kharkiv today with more than 10 missiles. Several locations were hit, including a supermarket which was full of people. It's inside a shopping mall. Also, Palace Sportu, event hall, was hit, and there were other locations hit, including Hydro Park.
Meanwhile, Ukraine has reportedly mounted an attack on the Moscow oil refinery. Eyewitnesses recorded the moment drones hit the plant, causing a small explosion. But the situation on the front line remains difficult for the Ukrainians.
Ukrainians are losing territory in Donbas while they are gaining territory in the Kursk region and hopefully in Białogorod region. Nevertheless, that is not the turning point of the war, at least till now.
Russian officials said earlier today that they successfully downed more than 150 drones used in Ukraine's offensive that targeted the Moscow refinery and power plants in the region.
And Russian forces are reportedly now within 10 kilometres of the eastern Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk, according to assessments by the British Ministry of Defence. Joining us live now from the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv is our correspondent, Oz Kataji. Good evening, Oz. What can you tell us about the situation in Donetsk at the moment?
So, yeah, this is an assessment made by the routine assessments by the British Ministry of Defence that says that the Russian forces have accelerated their advance towards Pokrovsk, the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. Now, why this is important is the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky only a few days ago on the 27th of August said that the Russian forces had slowed down their advances in Pokrovsk because of the Kursk offensive, and that was one of the objectives of the offensive. However, the British Ministry of Defence are not agreeing with this assessment and now assessing them, Russian forces, to now be within 10 kilometres of the strategic logistics hub. The city of Pokrovsk is a very vital infrastructure logistics hub for Ukraine's forces across the east of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine will breathe a sigh of relief that the other assessment coming from the British Ministry of Defence, that there isn't much activity elsewhere on the front besides what's happening in Kursk, obviously, and what's happening in the Pokrovsk direction at the moment. So, according to Syrskyi as well, that's the Ukraine's commander-in-chief who spoke a couple of days ago about the situation in Pokrovsk, said that the fighting there is exceptionally brutal. Ukraine is, without a shadow of a doubt, losing men, losing territory, losing ground to Russia in the Pokrovsk region, and that advance hasn't slowed It's been steadily advancing for the last 3 weeks at least now. So a difficult situation for the Ukrainians here in the Pokrovsk region, and the government are going to continue to try and stop the advances there, but no end in sight at the moment to that Russian advance in Donetsk.
Thank you, Oz. That was Oz Kataji from Kiev. 20 years ago, Chechen terrorists took over a school in Beslan, taking more than 1,000 people hostage, with most of them children. This attack and the botched rescue operation carried out by Russian forces led to hundreds of casualties.
On September the 1st, 2004, children and their parents all across Russia gathered to celebrate the official start of the school year. In the small town of Beslan, located in the North Ossetia region, the jubilant atmosphere of the day quickly gave way to terror.
We were standing there and they began shooting. We thought it was one of their parents shooting. Then these guys ran out, Chechens surrounded us and began shooting in the air. Then we started to run away.
The school was taken over by a Chechen Islamist commando, consisting of over 30 well-armed men. They managed to take around 1,100 people hostage, most of them children. The terrorists demanded withdrawal of Russian troops from Chechnya and international recognition of its independence. On the third day of the crisis, one of the bombs planted by the terrorists in the school exploded under unclear circumstances. The Russian forces launched a full assault on the school in response. The operation had not been properly planned, with various Russian units, as well as the armed parents, acting in an uncoordinated manner. The terrorists had begun murdering the hostages indiscriminately. Other hostages were killed in a crossfire between the Russian troops and the terrorists. The lack of a sufficient number of ambulances and firefighting equipment hampered an effective rescue response. In the end, some 333 people were killed, not including the terrorists. Among them, 186 were children.
People learned to live with this pain. As it turned out, life is stronger than death. So everybody lives, but each and every one of us understood that their values have changed and they think about life differently now.
The attack marked the end of significant Chechen terrorism. Terrorist attacks in Russia since have been motivated mostly by Islamism, not ethnic separatism.
The General Organization of Workers in Israel is calling for a general strike on Monday. This move is supposed to put pressure on the Israeli government, which has been unwilling to reach a hostage deal with Hamas.
Arnon Bar David, the head of the union, announced that Ben Gurion Airport would be closed tomorrow from 8 a.m. local time. He also asked all civilian workers to join the strike. The protest in Israel intensified after the IDF recovered bodies of 6 Israeli hostages in a tunnel complex in Rafah. According to Israeli authorities, Hirsch, Eden, Ori, Alex, Carmen and Almog had been killed by Hamas fighters not long before the bodies were discovered. In a speech delivered earlier today, Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu ruled out any possibility of an agreement with Hamas.
In recent days, as Israel has been holding intensive negotiations with the mediator in a supreme effort to reach a deal, Hamas is continuing to steadfastly refuse all proposals. Even worse, at the exact same time, it murdered 6 of our hostages. Whoever murders hostages does not want a deal.
Netanyahu's response sparked more protests and outrage among Israel's public.
We're here today because we found out this morning that 6 hostages were murdered in captivity by Hamas, and we want our hostages back home now.
The situation is particularly tense as the funeral ceremonies for the most recent victims are still being held.
Today, I urge my government and all the states of the world to make a deal, make it possible, make it happen. It's too late for us, it's too late for Carmel. I will never hug her again. But 101 people can still hug their families. For them, make the deal, save lives.
There is a mounting pressure within Israel to make a hostage deal with Hamas. The murdered 6 were among the group of around 250 hostages that were seized by Hamas in the attack on October the 7th last year. It is believed that about 100 more Israelis are still held by Hamas.
Polish football star Robert Lewandowski has been awarded the Order of the Smile in Poland's capital, Warsaw. This is an award that children bestow on adults for their contributions in improving their lives. Other notable laureates include Steven Spielberg and J.K. Rowling.
The Barcelona star has been handed the Order of the Smile, the only award given by children to adults for their distinguished love, aid and help for children all over the world. This event also marks the 65th anniversary of the formation of UKS Varsovia, Lewandowski's first club. It is a tradition that one needs to drink a cup of lemon juice while smiling through the process in order to receive the award. The nominations for the award are put forward by children and then they are analysed by adults.
We in the international chapter of the Order of Smile, we just decide about this application which we get from children. So it is an order given by children to the people who are helping children.
But the event also involved numerous attractions for children.
We have opportunity to have fun in this playground, in this place, in our academy. So we have a part to playing football, to playing basketball, to shoot penalties. So a lot of fun for our players.
Lewandowski is known for his charity work. He has been a UNICEF ambassador since 2014. Now he is also a proud holder of the Order of the Smile. From the stadium of UKS Varsovia, for TVP World, Piotr Miszczuk.
Now back to Poland's commemorations of the 85th anniversary of the start of World War II. Let's take a look at the timeline of the events following the initial German invasion.
Today marks the 85th anniversary of one of the deadliest conflicts known to mankind. In the early hours of September 1st, 1939, a German battleship Schleswig-Holstein attacked the Polish station at Westerplatte. Later that same day, a small border town, Wieluń, was also bombed. The town had no strategic importance, and countless civilians died. This was just the beginning of the atrocities yet to come.
Aerial menace over Poland, one of the consequences of Hitler's greed and arrogance. A defenseless village bombed and battered and wrecked, shattered by high explosive, burned by incendiaries.
The Polish armed forces fought bravely, but they were massively outnumbered by the better-equipped German army.
Poland in the 1930s, it's been independent only for a few years, really. Polish army is weak, with outdated equipment, but, you know, it does give it a good go on the 1st of September.
Prior to the attack on Poland, Germany signed a non-aggression pact with the Soviets. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact included a secret protocol establishing Poland's and the Baltic states' partition by the USSR and Germany. The protocol was enacted on September 17th when the Red Army invaded Poland from the east. Faced with a war on two fronts, Poland capitulated after a month of heavy fighting had depleted its resources. The war quickly engulfed the rest of Europe and eventually much of the world, raging until 1945. Up to 80 million people are thought to have died, including 55 million civilians. Germany's responsibility for starting World War II and the crimes it committed against Poland and its citizens have long been an unmended wound in Polish-German relations. Speaking at the commemorative ceremony in Wieluń, Polish President Andrzej Duda called on Germany to pay its due diligence.
Forgiveness and acknowledging one's crimes is one thing, reparations are another. The latter is yet to be addressed.
Over the past 10 years, more and more attempts at reconciliation have been made, but Germany does not seem eager to pay reparations.
The German government's position on the issue of reparations has not changed. Our opinion is still that the 2+4 agreement settled all these questions.
The spokesperson for the Polish History Museum, Michał Przeperski, stresses that the memory of the events of World War II remains ever present in our lives and shared his thoughts on the importance of marking such historic events.
Those days actually create the foundations of our memory of history as such, and also it really has a lot to do with our identity. Our identity, when I say our identity, I don't mean just Poles. I would actually mean all the free people of the world.
The message appears particularly important in light of the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine.
As we reported earlier in the show, exit polls are indicating the far-right alternative for Germany has taken first place in today's local elections in the federal state of Thuringia, and it's narrowly chasing the mainstream conservative Christian Democratic Union in Saxony. Here to discuss the result is Noah Barkin, a senior advisor at Rhodium Group. Good evening. Thank you for joining us on TVP World.
Good to be here.
So many polls predicted these election results, but they are still a major win for far-right AfD and populist parties. Do you think this will send shockwaves across Germany and Europe, or has this been a long time coming?
Well, I mean, this is a serious, I think, blow to the mainstream political parties here in Germany. And if you look across Europe, it fits with a pattern. If you look around, look at the Netherlands, look at Italy, we've had far-right or hard-right parties making gains in other countries besides Germany. But of course, because of Germany's past, this is a serious event that people are taking very seriously, and it really is a sign of that voters are very unsatisfied with the current government, the three-way coalition in Berlin, led by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. So I think this is a result which will be debated and talked about for weeks here in Germany.
Many will be wondering, how did Germany get here? Do East Germans feel like they've been left behind by Berlin and the West?
Well, it's important to say that voters from the former communist East have always voted a bit differently than those from the former West. And I think it is fair to say that East Germany, a good portion of the population, does feel left behind. The German economy has been stagnating. There's frustration with the war in Ukraine and the fact that the government has been delivering money and weapons to Ukraine. East Germany has perhaps a more sympathetic view towards Russia because of its history than do West Germans. But it's also important to note that, if you look nationwide, if you look at the polls, mainstream centrist parties still are on track to win about 2/3 of the vote in the next federal election about a year from now. So this is very worrying, but it is not necessarily a reflection of the broader sentiment in Germany at the moment.
To your point there, is there any indication that in fact the far right could have a similar level of success in next year's federal election, or like you mentioned there, does that not seem possible?
I would say that is very, very unlikely at the moment. The AfD scored above 30% in both of these state elections today. At the national level, they're polling around 16 to 17%, so they would need to double their scores over the coming year in order to match the scores that they got today in these two state elections. So I think that's very unlikely, and it's also very important to note that no other party in the German political system is willing to enter a coalition with the AfD, so that is not going to happen in these two states that voted today, and we're far away from that happening at the national level at the moment.
Parties like the SPD, the party of Chancellor Olaf Scholz, had a less than desired result for them in these local elections. The pressure has been mounting on Olaf Scholz and his coalition already. Do you think this is the beginning of the end for his re-election campaign for next year's federal election?
Well, I think Scholz faces a very steep uphill climb to hold on to power in the German election, which should take place in September or October of next year. His voters, I think 3 in 4 voters, so roughly 75% of voters say they are not happy with his leadership. There's huge amount of frustration in the population with the infighting within the current three-way coalition between Scholz's Social Democrats, the Greens, and the Free Democrats. They are struggling to get things done. This is a very loveless coalition. So I think right now, if you look at the polls, the center-right CDU is far ahead, has roughly double the score of Scholz's Social Democrats in the polls. So the betting odds right now, as of today, are that the CDU, the former party of Angela Merkel, who was the previous German chancellor, is going to win the next federal election and run the next German government. But there's still a year to go. A lot can happen, and I don't think Scholz has completely given up on his chances. I also doubt, although there will be some debate about these elections triggering perhaps a collapse of the government and early elections in Germany. I think that's very unlikely because none of the governing parties at the moment have an interest in early elections. They would rather wait as long as possible so their poll ratings potentially go up.
A year is indeed a long time in politics. Of course, we've talked a lot about the AfD. Another party taking advantage of voter dissatisfaction is the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance, known as the BSW. Both her and the AfD have one thing in common. They're pro-Russia and they oppose support for Ukraine. Do you think today's election results are also a win for Russian President Vladimir Putin?
Well, if you look at the results, obviously this new party led by Sarah Wagenknecht did quite well. But she established her new party beginning of this year, broke away from a far-left party called Die Linke. And if you add up her votes and Die Linke votes together, you're getting roughly the same result as you got 5 years ago in the elections in these states. So I would not say that it's a huge win for Vladimir Putin. As I said, East German states have been much more sympathetic to Russia. They've been much more critical of the government's support for Ukraine, sanctions against Russia. But they have very little impact on federal policy. Sarah Wagenknecht could become a bit of a kingmaker in these two states because the mainstream parties will be looking to form a coalition without the AfD, and they may not be able to do that without Sarah Wagenknecht. So there will be a debate over Ukraine policy as these state governments come together. But I don't think this is going to have a huge impact on the federal government's support for Ukraine over the next year until the next federal election.
So does a country like Poland need to be worried about the rise of the AfD in East Germany, given that regional tensions are so high?
Well, I think all Europeans who support democracy and the rule of law have to be worried about the rise of a party like the AfD. It's important to note that the AfD is far more radical in many ways than some of the other right-wing parties in Europe. Marine Le Pen in France, Giorgia Meloni in Italy. This party is an ethno-nationalist party, would like to see immigrants pushed out of Germany, and as you said, is quite sympathetic to Vladimir Putin and Russia. So if these sentiments, particularly over Ukraine, were to spread in the population, if support for the government's policy on Ukraine were to weaken, then that, of course, would be have an important impact on the war in Ukraine and Poland as well.
And we are running out of time, but very shortly, today marks 85 years since Germany invaded Poland. Polish President Andrzej Duda says reparations are, and I quote, not just possible but due. Do you think it's time for the Germans to come to the table, or do you think they could in the near future?
Well, the Germans have been pretty consistent about this. I've been in Berlin for about 20 years now, reporting on as a journalist and now as an analyst. My sense is that there is not a great deal of appetite in the political establishment for paying reparations, and I suspect that this is unlikely to change after the federal election a year from now.
Noah Barkin, Senior Advisor at Rhodium Group, thank you again for your time.
Thanks.
And that's World News tonight. For more, do stay tuned with us here on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.